Lauren, a 58-year-old woman of wealth and status, sat in the corner of the most exclusive restaurant in town. She had everything meticulously planned: her days, her business ventures, even her leisure activities. But what she couldn't plan for was the gnawing emptiness that crept in during quiet moments. She adjusted the delicate napkin on her lap, her fingers tracing the embroidered initials of the restaurant's name. Dinner tonight was meant to be a distraction, a chance to enjoy fine wine and decadent food, and forget for a few hours the weight of a decision she had made 2 decades earlier. The restaurant hummed with soft chatter, the clinking of glasses, and the gentle strumming of a classical guitar. Lauren sipped her wine, savoring its rich flavor, when a sudden jolt disrupted her tranquility. "I'm so sorry," a young waitress exclaimed, wide-eyed, as deep red wine soaked into Lauren's silk dress. The girl fumbled with napkins, her hands shaking as she tried to blot the fabric. I'll get the manager right away." Lauren's face stiffened, her eyes narrowing as she stared at the mess. Normally, she would demand immediate compensation or at least an apology that felt adequate. But as the waitress extended her hand to mop up the stain, something caught Lauren's attention. The girl's right hand, trembling slightly as she wiped the table, bore a faint, irregular birthmark just below the thumb, an unmistakable shape Lauren would recognize anywhere. Her breath caught in her throat, her mind reeling. It was impossible. No, it couldn't be. Lauren blinked hard, her polished exterior momentarily slipping as her heart raced. That birthmark. It was identical to the one she had glimpsed on a tiny hand so many years ago, in a hospital room she had tried to forget. She had given up her child right after birth, leaving the hospital without a second look, trying to believe it was the right thing to do. Could this girl be? No. She had moved on. She'd buried the past. Or at least, she thought she had. But now, the sight of that familiar mark cracked open old wounds she wasn't prepared to face. Lauren remained frozen in her seat as the waitress dashed off to find the manager, her mind flooded with memories she had locked away for years. When the girl returned, flustered but polite, Lauren didn't register a word she said. All she could see was that mark. "Excuse me," Lauren interrupted, her voice steadier than she felt. "What's your name?" The young waitress, still apologizing profusely, glanced at her name tag as if she had forgotten her own identity in the chaos of the moment. "It's Emily," she replied. Emily. That wasn't the name Lauren had given her. But after 20 years, things change, don't they? People move on, grow up, and take on new lives. Lauren's chest tightened, a silent storm brewing beneath her calm exterior. She needed to know more. That night, Lauren couldn't sleep. The luxurious sheets of her sprawling estate, usually a comfort, felt suffocating. Her mind replayed the scene from the restaurant on a loop, that birthmark on Emily's hand haunting her thoughts. Could this young woman be her daughter, the child she had abandoned all those years ago? 20 years earlier, Lauren had been a different person. She was in love with a man named Ryan, a relationship filled with passion but marred by complications. When she found out she was pregnant, Ryan had been the first to suggest an abortion. He wasn't ready for fatherhood, he had said. He had a future to build, and a child didn't fit into that future. But Lauren couldn't go through with it. Something inside her refused to end that life growing within her. In a moment of desperation, she carried the pregnancy to term in secret, telling no one. On the day she gave birth, she made the most painful decision of her life. She left the hospital, leaving the infant behind, hoping that someone else could give her daughter a better life, one without the shadows of her mistakes. For years, Lauren convinced herself that she had made the right choice. She built a successful business, married into wealth, and created a life most people envied. But every now and then she would catch herself wondering, what became of the child she had abandoned? Where was she? Who had raised her? And now, there was Emily. That birthmark, the timing, the circumstances. It all seemed too coincidental, too close to the truth she had buried for 2 decades. Lauren reached for her phone in the middle of the night, her fingers hesitating before pulling up a search engine. She typed the words with trembling hands. Emily, adopted, age 20. She knew it was a long shot, but she couldn't shake the feeling that fate had thrown this young woman into her path for a reason. Her search yielded little, as expected, but she couldn't give up. Not yet. She needed to know more about Emily. Was she really the daughter she had lost? The next day, Lauren returned to the restaurant. She had no plan, no idea what she would say, but she couldn't stay away. She sat at the same table, waiting for Emily to appear. When the young waitress finally arrived, Lauren's heart raced, her emotions barely contained beneath her composed facade. "Emily," Lauren said softly, as the girl placed a menu in front of her. "Do you have a moment to talk?" Emily hesitated, unsure of what the older woman wanted. "Is this about last night? I'm really sorry about the wine." "It's not about that," Lauren interrupted, her voice gentle but firm. I'd like to know more about you, where you're from, your family." Emily looked puzzled but sat down cautiously. I'm adopted," she said, almost offensively. "I don't know much about my biological parents. I was left at a hospital when I was a baby." Lauren's breath caught. This was it, the confirmation she dreaded yet needed. She smiled, though it felt forced. "I see," she replied softly, her heart racing with a mix of relief and anxiety. There was no turning back now. Lauren couldn't stay away from Emily now, not with all the pieces of the past suddenly clicking into place. Every part of her ached to know the truth, to confirm whether this young woman was indeed her daughter. But Lauren had spent a lifetime building walls around her heart, her mistakes, and her secrets. She wasn't sure how to tear them down, especially not for someone who might resent her for the choices she made 2 decades ago. The following week, Lauren found herself returning to the Resta. She had never been one to frequent the same place too often, but her desire to see Emily, just to learn more, was irresistible. Each visit brought more questions, more curiosity. Was Emily happy? Did she grow up in a loving family? What had her life been like without Lauren? Over the course of several dinners, Lauren began asking Emily small, innocuous questions. They started simple: where Emily went to school, if she had any siblings, what her favorite things to do were. Lauren carefully framed each question to appear casual, though her heart pounded with every answer. Emily, always friendly, seemed a little wary of the attention at first, but soon relaxed as the older woman showed genuine interest in her life. "I grew up in a small town outside the city," Emily mentioned one evening, clearing Lauren's plate. "It was just me and my parents. They're really great, always supportive. I went to a community college nearby, but now I'm just working until I figure out." Lauren's chest tightened. "That's wonderful," she replied, her smile strained. "And your parents, they adopted you when you were a baby?" "Yeah," Emily answered, not looking up from the table. "I was left at a hospital. Never knew why. They told me I was just left." The words hit Lauren like a punch. Left. It was such a cold word for something that had torn her apart all those years ago. She had agonized over that decision, imagining that her daughter would be better off without her, but hearing it now, so casually from Emily's lips, made Lauren realize just how deep the wound might have been for her daughter. Lauren nodded, her throat tight. "You must have had a lot of questions growing up," she ventured cautiously. Emily shrugged. "I guess, but my parents gave me everything I needed, so I stopped wondering after a while." Her voice was casual, but Lauren saw a flicker of something deeper in her expression. Emily had questions. Lauren could sense it, but she had learned to bury them, just like Lauren had done with her own regrets. That evening, Lauren left the restaurant with even more uncertainty. How could she possibly reveal the truth to Emily now? Would the girl see it as a betrayal? Would she hate Lauren for abandoning her? The questions swirled in her mind, and for the first time in years, Lauren felt vulnerable, unsure of her next step. It was a Friday evening when Lauren finally reached her bride. She had been avoiding the inevitable, dancing around the truth with Emily for weeks. But the time had come. She couldn't keep living in this limbo, knowing that every time she saw Emily, she was withholding the one piece of information that could change both their lives. That night, as Emily cleared the last of the dinner plates from her table, Lauren's heart raced. She had rehearsed the conversation in her head 1,000 times but had no idea how it would play out in reality. "Emily," she began, her voice catching slightly. "I need to tell you something, it's important." Emily glanced at her, concern flickering in her eyes. She sat down, sensing that whatever Lauren had to say wasn't just casual conversation. "Okay," Emily said slowly. "What is it?" Lauren took a deep breath, her hands trembling in her lap. I know this is going to sound strange, but I believe you're my daughter." The words hung in the air, heavy and unmovable. For a moment there was silence between them, the noise of the restaurant fading into the background. Emily's expression remained unreadable, her eyes fixed on Lauren as if she hadn't fully processed the statement. "What?" Emily's voice was barely above a whisper, her face a mixture of disbelief and confusion. "I think you're the child I gave up for adoption 20 years ago," Lauren continued, her voice growing more urgent. "I had a daughter, and I left her at the hospital because I thought it was the right thing to do. I wasn't in a position to take care of her, and I wanted her to have a better life." Emily stared at her, her face pale. "You're saying, that's me?" Lauren nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. "I saw the birthmark on your hand, the same one my baby had when she was born, and when you told me you were adopted, I knew. I had to know for sure." Emily's eyes widened as she looked down at her hand, the birthmark that had always been a part of her suddenly taking on a new meaning. "You left me?" "I did," Lauren admitted, her voice breaking. "And I've regretted it every single day since. I thought I was doing what was best for you, but now I know how wrong I was." For a long moment, Emily didn't say anything. She just sat there, staring at her hand, as if trying to make sense of a lifetime of questions that were now unraveling in Effa. When she finally spoke, her voice was shaky but steady. "Why now?" Emily asked, her eyes locking onto Lauren's. "Why are you telling me this now?" Lauren wiped a tear from her cheek. "Because I've spent too many years running from the past, and I couldn't live with myself if I let this opportunity slip away. I know I can't make up for what I did, but I wanted you to know the truth." Emily's eyes were filled with pain, confusion, and 1,000 unspoken emotions. She stood up from the table, her chair scraping against the floor, and without another word, she walked out of the restaurant. Lauren remained seated, her heart shattered, knowing that the hardest part had only just begun. The following days felt like a blur to Lauren. She went through the motions of her daily life, attending meetings, finalizing business deals, and sitting through dinners with acquaintances she could barely focus on. But her mind was elsewhere, always with Emily. Every time she thought about that night at the restaurant, it replayed in her head like a bad dream. The look on Emily's face, the shock, the disbelief, and then the pain. Lauren had expected anger, even hatred, but what she hadn't prepared for was the overwhelming silence that followed. Emily had walked out without a word, leaving Lauren with nothing but her own guilt and questions. Would Emily ever speak to her again? Would she ever understand the reasons behind the decision Lauren had made? Or was the damage already done, beyond repair? Late one evening, after a long, exhausting day, Lauren sat in her empty living room, staring at the glass of wine she hadn't touched. Her sprawling mansion, with its high ceilings and elegant furnishings, felt like a hollow shell, amplifying the loneliness she had long ignored. She had spent her life building a fortress around herself, thinking that wealth and success would be enough to keep the pain at bay. But now all the money in the world couldn't buy back the years she had lost with her daughter. Lauren pulled out her phone, her fingers hovering over the screen. She had Emily's number from a casual exchange during one of their previous conversations, but she hadn't used it since that night. She typed a message, then deleted it. Typed again, hesitated, and deleted it once more. Nothing felt right. She wanted to apologize, to explain herself, but she didn't know where to start. Just as she was about to give up, her phone buzzed with an incoming message. She glanced at the screen, her heart skipping a beat when she saw Emily's name. The message was short, but it sent a wave of relief washing over her. "Can we talk?" Lauren's fingers trembled as she typed her response. "Of course. Anytime. Anywhere. Just tell me when you're ready." There was a long pause before Emily's next message arrived. "Tomorrow. Same restaurant, 7 p.m. Lauren's heart pounded. It wasn't much, but Emily hadn't shut her out completely. There was still a chance, and Lauren wasn't about to waste it. Lauren arrived at the restaurant early the next evening, her nerves on edge. She had spent the entire day rehearsing what she would say, trying to find the right balance between apology and explanation. But as the minutes ticked by and the time for their meeting approached, her mind felt blank. Nothing seemed adequate for the weight of the conversation they were about to have. Emily walked in. She looked calm on the outside, but the tension in her posture was unmistakable. She didn't smile when she saw Lauren, didn't offer any pleasantries. She simply took a seat across from her, her eyes guarded, as if she were bracing herself for something. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence was thick with unspoken words, the air between them charged with the weight of the truth that had been revealed. Finally, Lauren cleared her throat, breaking the uneasy quiet. "Thank you for coming," Emily shrugged. "I figured I'd hear what you have to say." Lauren nodded, her heart heavy. "I don't expect you to forgive me, Emily. I know I hurt you, probably more than I can ever understand. But I need you to know that leaving you was the hardest decision I ever made. I thought I was doing the right thing. I wasn't in a place to take care of a child, and I believed you'd be better off with a family who could give you everything I couldn't." Emily listened, her expression unreadable. "But why? Why come into my life after all this time? If you really believed you were doing the right thing, why not just leave it alone?" Lauren's chest tightened at the question. It was the one she had asked herself countless times over the past few weeks. Why couldn't she just leave the past buried? "Because I've lived with the regret of that decision every day for 20 years, Lauren admitted, her voice thick with emotion. "And when I saw you that night, when I recognized the birthmark, I couldn't, not again. I had to know you, had to at least try to explain myself. I know I've lost the right to be in your life, but I couldn't bear the thought of never trying." Emily stared at her for a long moment, her eyes searching Lauren's face as if trying to make sense of the woman sitting in front of her. "It wasn't just about you, you know," Emily said quietly. "Growing up, I always wondered. I wondered why my real parents didn't want me, why I wasn't enough. My adoptive parents were great, but there was always this question, this hole. And now here you are, and I don't know what to do with it." Lauren's heart broke at Emily's words. She had never truly considered how her decision had affected the life of the daughter she left behind. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I never wanted to hurt you. I thought I was doing what was best for you," Lauren continued, her voice cracking slightly. "I didn't want you to grow up in an unstable life. I wasn't real, but I never stopped thinking about you. I tried to convince myself that I made the right choice, that you would be happier without me. But deep down, I've always regretted it." Emily's expression softened slightly, though her guard was still up. "I don't know what to say," she admitted. "I mean, you come into my life out of nowhere after 20 years and you expect me to just... what? Understand? Forgive? I don't expect anything from you," Lauren said softly, her hands clenched in her lap. "I know I can't make up for the time we lost, and I know you have every right to be angry. I just want you to know the truth, that I loved you, even if I wasn't there for you." Emily looked down at her hands, her fingers brushing over the faint birthmark that had triggered everything. Her mind was a whirlwind of emotions, anger, confusion, and a longing she hadn't realized existed until now. "I don't know if I can forgive you," Emily whispered, her voice raw. "It's a lot to take in. But I guess I'm glad you told me. At least now I know." Lauren nodded, tears welling in her eyes but not falling. That's all I wanted, just to be honest with you. And maybe if you're willing, maybe we can try to get to know each other. No expectations, just to see what happens. Emily met her gaze, still hesitant, but something in her expression had softened. The wall between them wasn't gone, but there was a crack, small, but it was there. I don't know if I'm ready for that, she said quietly. We'll see. Lauren nodded, understanding. Take all the time you need, she replied gently. I'll be here. The two women sat in silence for a moment longer, the conversation leaving them both emotionally drained but also strangely lighter. It wasn't a resolution. There was still so much to navigate, so much pain and uncertainty. But it was a start. And for the first time in years, Lauren felt a glimmer of hope. As Emily stood to leave, she glanced back at Lauren, her expression still conflicted but no longer entirely closed off. I'll call you, she said softly, before turning and walking out the door. Lauren watched her go, her heart full of emotions she couldn't quite name. The road ahead would be difficult, she knew that. But for now, the hardest part was over. She had told the truth, and Emily hadn't shut her out completely. That was more than she could have hoped for. As the door closed behind Emily, Lauren allowed herself a small, hopeful smile. There was still a long way to go, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like maybe, just maybe, things could be different. The days following their conversation felt like an emotional limbo for Lauren. She replayed every word, every glance exchanged between herself and Emily at the restaurant. Though Emily had said she might call, the uncertainty of when, or if, hung over Lauren's every waking moment. She tried to focus on work, to immerse herself in the distractions of her business, but none of it had the same meaning it once did. Her mind was always on Emily. It was mid-afternoon when Lauren's phone buzzed with a message. Her heart leaped when she saw Emily's name flash across the screen. Would you like to meet for coffee this weekend? Lauren could barely breathe as she typed her response. Yes, I'd love that. Just let me know where and when. A few minutes later, another message arrived. There's a small cafe on 5th Avenue. How about Saturday at 10 a.m.? Lauren agreed, her nerves a tangled knot of anticipation and anxiety. This was her chance. A chance to try and rebuild something, however fragile it might be. The rest of the week passed in a blur of restless nights and moments of hope that maybe, just maybe, Emily was starting to open up to the idea of knowing her. Saturday arrived, and Lauren made her way to the cafe. Arriving she ordered a cup of tea and waited, her hands gripping the cup tightly as she stared out the window watching people stroll by. Time felt both fast and slow, her mind racing with possibilities for the conversation ahead. When Emily finally walked in, Lauren felt her chest tighten. The younger woman looked both familiar and distant, a reminder of all the years they had missed together. Emily greeted her with a small nod before sitting down across from her, ordering a coffee. For a few moments, the silence between them felt awkward, both women unsure of how to begin. Lauren searched for the right words, wanting to make this moment matter but not overwhelm Emily with too much too soon. How have you been? Lauren asked gently, breaking the tension. Emily shrugged. I've been okay, I guess. It's a lot to process. Lauren nodded, understanding. I can imagine. I don't want to pressure you, Emily. I'm grateful that you wanted to meet. Emily sipped her coffee, her expression thoughtful. I've been thinking a lot since we talked, she admitted, about what it all means, about how you left me. And I'm still angry. I'm still hurt. But I also realize that holding on to all that won't help me. I don't want to carry that around forever. Lauren felt her heart twist at Emily's words. I understand. And I know I can't take back the past. But I want to be here for you, in whatever way you need. Emily looked down at her cup, her fingers tracing the rim. I'm not sure what I need, she admitted, but I think I need time to figure it all out. Lauren nodded, her voice soft. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere." They sat in companionable silence for a few moments, the weight of their conversation settling around them. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. Lauren could feel the shift between them, a small step forward, and that was all she could hope for. Over the next few weeks, Lauren and Emily's meetings became more frequent. There were no grand gestures, no dramatic confrontations, just small moments of connection over coffee or lunch. Each meeting was tentative, both women careful not to push too far too fast, but with every conversation, the distance between them seemed to shrink just a little more. Lauren learned about Emily's life in bits and pieces. She listened intently as Emily talked about her adoptive parents, how they had supported her through school, and how they had provided a stable, loving home. Every story was a reminder of what Lauren had missed, but instead of dwelling on the regret, she tried to focus on the future. There was still time to build something new. For Emily, the process of forgiveness was slow. Her heart was still bruised by the revelation that the woman who had left her at birth was now sitting across from her trying to make amends. But as they talked, she found herself softening, bit by bit. There was still a long way to go, but the anger she had carried for so long was starting to fade, replaced by a cautious curiosity about the woman who was her biological mother. One afternoon, after a long walk in the park, Emily finally asked the question that had been on her mind for weeks. "Do you ever think about what it would have been like if you had kept me?" Lauren stopped walking, turning to face her. The question hit her like a wave, and she could see the vulnerability in Emily's eyes. "I've thought about it every single day," Lauren admitted, her voice thick with emotion. "I can't tell you how many nights I've wondered what your life would have been like if I had been there, if I had made a different choice. And I regret it, more than anything." Emily looked away, her expression conflicted. "It's hard, you know, to think about what could have been." "I know," Lauren whispered. "And I'm sorry. I know I can't change the past, but I want to be here for you now, in whatever way you'll let me." Emily nodded slowly, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. "I don't know what that looks like yet, but I think I want to try." Lauren's heart swelled with relief. It wasn't a promise, but it was enough. Enough to keep her going. Enough to keep hoping that maybe they could build something real between them. They walked in silence for a while longer, the weight of the conversation hanging between them. But this time, the silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was filled with possibility, small steps toward healing, toward forgiveness. As they reached the end of the path, Emily glanced at Lauren, a small smile playing at the corner of her lips. "I'll see you next week?" Lauren smiled back, her heart full. The weeks that followed brought a quiet but undeniable shift in the relationship between Lauren and Emily. What had begun as tentative meetings filled with uncertainty slowly grew into something more familiar, more comfortable. Their conversations became deeper, more personal, as Emily gradually let down her guard, allowing Lauren glimpses into the life she had missed for 2 decades. One Saturday morning, Lauren invited Emily to her home for the first time. The invitation felt significant, a step forward in their delicate dance toward reconciliation. Emily hesitated at first, unsure of what it would be like to see the world Lauren had built without her. But curiosity and a growing sense of trust won out. When Emily arrived, Lauren greeted her at the door with a smile that felt both excited and nervous. "Come in," she said, stepping aside to let Emily enter. The house was exactly what Emily had expected. Grand, luxurious, filled with the trappings of. Yet there was something about it that felt empty, despite the beauty. It was as though the house itself held the same loneliness that Lauren had carried for years. "You have a beautiful home," Emily said, her tone polite but distant. Lauren smiled, though she sensed the detachment in Emily's words. "Thank you. It's big, I suppose. Sometimes too big." Emily glanced around the expansive living room, taking in the high ceilings, the carefully arranged furniture, the art on the walls. "Do you ever feel lonely here?" Lauren's breath caught at the question. She hadn't expected Emily to be so direct, but perhaps after everything, there was no room for pretense. "I do," she admitted softly. "I have for a long time. I think that's why I've always buried myself in work. It's easier than facing the silence." Emily nodded, understanding. She had grown up in a small, cozy house filled with love, but far from the kind of wealth Lauren had. Still, she could see the truth in Lauren's words. Money hadn't filled the void. They sat down in the sunlit kitchen, sharing a quiet moment over coffee. For the first time, Lauren felt like she wasn't just speaking to Emily as the daughter she had abandoned, but as a young woman with her own thoughts, her own experiences. "I've been thinking a lot," Emily began, breaking the silence. "About everything. About what you did, why you did it, and about the life I've had because of it." Lauren waited, her heart pounding in her chest, knowing that this was the moment she had both dreaded and hoped for. "I'm still angry," Emily said, her voice steady. "And I don't know if I'll ever fully get over that. But I also realize that holding on to that anger forever isn't going to help either of us. You made a choice and it hurt me, but I can't change the past. And I think, maybe, we can try to move forward." Lauren blinked back tears, her throat tight with emotion. "I understand. And I don't expect you to forget or forgive right away. I just want you to know that I'm here. I want to be part of your life, if you'll let me." Emily looked down at her hands, her fingers tracing the edge of the coffee cup. "I think I want that too," she said softly. The relief that washed over Lauren was overwhelming. It wasn't a perfect resolution, but it was more than she had dared to hope for. It was a chance to build something new, to start over, even after all the lost years. "I know it won't be easy," Lauren said quietly, "but we can take it one step at a time. No rush, no pressure, just see where things go." Emily met her gaze, her expression softened by the weight of everything they had been through. "One step at a time," she agreed. The rest of the afternoon passed peacefully, the conversation flowing naturally, as though they had reached a tentative understanding. There were still many things left unsaid, many emotions still to process, but the foundation of something new, something fragile but real, was beginning to take shape. As Emily left that evening, she turned to Lauren at the door, a small but genuine smile on her face. "Thanks for today," she said. "I'll see you soon." Lauren nodded, her heart full. "I'll be here." For the first time in years, Lauren felt a sense of peace. The past would always be a part of them, but it no longer defined their fa. There was still a long way to go, but now at least they were walking that road together. The confrontation between Lauren and Emily didn't resolve every issue, nor did it erase the pain of the past. But it opened the door to forgiveness. Slow, difficult, and incomplete, but present nonetheless. Emily was no longer burdened by the questions that had haunted her since childhood, and Lauren had finally faced the consequences of her choices. As they both navigated the uncertainties of their newfound relationship, they understood that the journey ahead wouldn't be easy. But they had something they hadn't had before, a chance. And sometimes, that's all you need. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey between Lauren and Emily. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to click the card above to watch more stories like this one. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and leave a comment below. I love reading your thoughts and hearing what you think about the characters and their journey. Let's keep the conversation going.